best and worst. G'day to all you lovely people and welcome back to my channel. I'm Kathy and today I wanted to talk about my favourite and least favourite reads of 2021. I should mention, however, that as I read 2 very large series last year, there aren't going to be that many books in this list. And keep in mind that this list is my opinion only about the books I have read. It isn't any reflection on the books themselves, it's simply that some of these books didn't appeal to me and others did. Okay, so let's start off with the books I hated. And if you have watched my videos on my channel, then you most likely already know which ones I'm going to be talking about. And that is the first 2 books in the Grisha trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. Shadow and Bone, and I think Siege and Storm was the second. Wow, I hated those books. I despised the first one and I hated the second even more. That one was a very disappointing read. The Grisha books are about, I guess, a chosen one. I can't even remember her name. That's how much I loved it. Who might be able to save her world by getting rid of this darkness that has split the country into 2. That is a basic summary of the plot. The reason I read them is because there was a television series coming out and people were saying the show was really good, and I like to read the books before I watch, say, a show or a movie that they're based on. And I'd read some great reviews about this series. I'd even seen a couple of videos. Not too much because I don't like to spoil the story, but it seemed that it was very popular. Yeah, well, certainly not for me. I really struggled with the first book, which is Shadow and Bone. I didn't hate it all, but there were so many things that annoyed me that it was really hard to read. And I think that if you are an older person, mature person, I don't think that book would suit you. It was definitely geared towards a very young audience. I felt anyway. And some of the things that happened just drove me nuts. But I knew it was popular, so I thought perhaps I need to read the second one. Perhaps the author improves in the second one. What a mistake! Oh my God. The second one was actually worse. I hated it so much that it was a real effort to finish it. But I am the kind of person who doesn't like to leave things unfinished, particularly books. It is very rare for me to not finish a book, especially if I get, say, a third of the way in. But wow, I really felt I wasted my time. I've said this before, I don't think I will be reading any more Bardugo books because I just can't see the appeal. I thought 2 gave me a good idea as to her style. Perhaps she improves in later series, I don't know, but I'm not going to find out because, yeah, I think 2 was enough for me to judge whether I would enjoy her books or not. Now, perhaps I was lucky in what I did choose to read last year, but these were the only 2 books that left me utterly disappointed. And I even regretted reading. But I really shouldn't see it that way. The truth is, every reading experience, no matter what the book is, will show us something. It showed me that, yeah, I still don't like young adult fiction. Something else I read that I didn't enjoy all that much was The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I had heard great things about this author and I was really looking forward to reading this book. It is based on a trilogy. I can't remember what the trilogy is called, but I'll put it on the screen for you. And rather than being a plot-driven story, it is more character-based, about three main characters in particular. I have actually recorded a review of this book. It just hasn't come out yet, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I didn't like it. No, it didn't appeal to me for several reasons. There were some things I really enjoyed about it, but I generally had to force myself to finish it, which is usually a sign that I'm not enjoying the book. I'm still undecided whether I'm going to read the sequel or not. Perhaps. I guess you guys will find out in the future. So that was another of my least favourite books that I read last year. What else? Slaughterhouse-Five by Vonnegut, which is really about the experiences of the characters in the book of the bombing of Dresden in World War II. I found the book all over the place. I never knew why it was involving certain things. I know that there are allegories that I probably missed, but there are even aliens, or supposedly aliens, in this book about war. So it is a strange book. The one thing I really did love about it, though, was the anti-war sentiment. Because I am also very anti-war. I'm a pacifist, and I hate that we have wars still in this day and age. So I did really love that part of it. And it is heart-wrenching at times, just seeing the experiences that these people were going through. Ultimately, this isn't a book I hated. It was just one of my least favourite reads of last year. Doesn't make it a bad book whatsoever, just not something that really blew my mind, as certain books do. Another of my least favourite reads of last year was Flights by Olga Tarkozak, and I know I have mispronounced that. I'll put it on the screen anyway. This book was about travelling, about being constantly in motion, about what it means to travel, why we travel. It's referred to as a novel, but it's more fragmented than that. There are a lot of vignettes, a lot of almost short stories in themselves, all with the common theme of what it means to travel, what happens when people do travel. I like that aspect of it. I did not like all the emphasis on anatomy. I found that so boring, actually, I must admit. The first time it happened, I thought, well, that's a little strange, but it was repeated so often throughout the book that I didn't like that aspect of it. And I don't think it added anything to the actual overall story. Not in my opinion anyway. So that was also one of my least favourite books of last year. Okay, let's move on to my favourite books of 2021. First is The Stand by Stephen King, which I have read many, many times. This might have been my 6th or 7th or even possibly 8th reading. I was actually intending to read it in 2020, but in Melbourne we were in lockdown for such a long time that I just couldn't bring myself to. But I did read it last year and I loved it as much as always. It is about a pandemic, Captain Trips, which actually wipes out 99% of the population in the world. It's an apocalyptic book. What I love about it is a lot of the themes in it. The book deals with how this pandemic wipes out most of the population and what the survivors do in the aftermath. How do they pick up the pieces again? One of my favourite themes of the book is, as a society, can we do better? Or are we destined to repeat the same mistakes? Because this is like having a clean slate. We have a very small population now who are trying to rebuild their world. I haven't decided yet if we are capable of learning or whether we will just repeat the mistakes of the past. But I do love that aspect of the book. I love also so many of the characters, but that is always one of my favourite things about King's books is his characters. And I definitely recommend The Stand if you haven't read it, particularly if you like dystopian or post-apocalyptic books. It is very well written, though it is very long, but Well worth it, in my opinion. If you ask me, it is one of his best books. Something new to me, a new author that I learned to love last year, was Terry Pratchett and his Discworld books. I've always known about the Discworld books, but I was always into more classic fantasy, so they didn't really appeal to me. And I'm so glad that one of my subscribers recommended him and that I finally picked one up because I loved it. The Discworld books are fantasy-based, absurdist fantasy, very reminiscent of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but based in a fantasy world. And so many things that happen in them are so clever, so funny. I defy anyone to read a Discworld book and not laugh out loud. Out of the 5 Discworld books that I've read so far, and I am reading them according to publication date, my favourites are The Colour of Magic and Mort. I also really loved Granny from Equal Rights. She is hilarious, actually. I think there is nothing more exciting than discovering that you love a new author. I have struggled with this. I have tried several authors, particularly in fantasy, and I haven't liked a lot of them, or I felt very lukewarm about them. It doesn't often happen that you find you love an author. That happened to me with the Discworld books, with Terry Pratchett. I love his writing style. I love this world he's created, which I never would have thought. He was such a talented, imaginative, and intelligent writer. A lot of the themes that I've read in the books so far, they're quite pointed actually about some of the absurdity of human nature or our society or politics or economy, whatever it is. I'm intending to read at least 20 this year. I have 15 to go. I highly recommend the Discworld books if you haven't tried them yet. Don't be like me and hesitate because you think, oh, I'm not really into that. I want more serious fantasy. Sometimes it's good to laugh. And I don't know about you, but books struggle sometimes to make me laugh. All right, now the next 2 series of books, I would be surprised if you guys don't know what they are because I have mentioned them so many times on my channel. I'll start off with The Wheel of Time. I have already done a video on The Wheel of Time and I'll link it somewhere up here. Oh, it's always the other side. I always say this side. Anyway, you can watch that video about The Wheel of Time itself, what it's about. But to summarize very briefly, it is about a chosen one, the Dragon Reborn, who is meant to fight the Dark One at a last battle. The epic, ultimate fight of good against evil, possibly. I'm not going to go in any more detail because I've already spoken about the Wheel of Time several times. What I will say, though, is that I finally started rereading it last year after a long break in between. I have read most of the books many times, just not the last 2. And it was, wow, yeah, it blew me away. I felt like I had been through the emotional ringer at the end of it. It was just so satisfying and yet devastating too, to know that it was over, that there was no more, because I always want more. That is my thing, I guess. I love long series because I get to spend so much more time with these characters in this amazing world. And Jordan has, in my opinion, the best fantastical world I have ever read about. It is just so rich and intricate, with so many different cultures and customs. I absolutely love that part of it. And when you read The Wheel of Time, you become so immersed in it. You really do feel like this is your world now. Well, that's how I felt. Though I was devastated at the end that it was over with. But that is what I consider great writing. When a book or series of books can make you feel so emotional, that means they've reached you, that you feel connected in some way to the book, to the characters, to this world, to this story. What more can you ask, right? It doesn't happen very often. I feel I've read a lot of fantasy over the years, a lot of series of fantasy. That happens very rarely to me, and it happened to me twice last year. How unusual is that? The first is obviously The Wheel of Time, which I cannot recommend enough, though I recognize it may not be for everyone given that it is such a long series. It is 14 very thick books with a prequel as well. But they were definitely a favourite from last year. I cannot even pinpoint specific books because I just love so many. And for me with series, they tend to blur after a while. It just seems like one gigantic, ginormous, continuous story. And if that wasn't enough, in the midst of reading The Wheel of Time, I started the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. My preferences in fantasy were, I'm not even sure I can say it still is, for more classic fantasy, more fantastical worlds. I was interested in worlds that were different to ours. So urban fantasy never really appealed to me. I have read several urban fantasy novels, one-offs, years and years ago, and they were just not my thing. I was always more drawn to classical fantasy, like Eddings or Raymond Feist or Catherine Kerr or Robert Jordan. So when I started Stormfront, the first book in the Dresden Files, I was a little hesitant. I didn't think it would appeal to me. Boy, was I wrong. There are 17 novels and there are 2 short story collections. I've read all but one of the short story collections, and I can say without hesitation that this is one of my all-time favourite series. I don't think this will come as any surprise to anyone, considering I am reviewing every single one of the books. But I'll be honest, when I first reviewed Stormfront, it wasn't my intention to review every single book. I wanted to get more experienced at reviewing, and I thought I might do a few, and that was all. But I have been loving this series so much. It's been a joy to discuss each book with people. And as far as I'm concerned, it is one of the most exceptional series I have read in many, many years. Now I know that urban fantasy may not be for everyone. It certainly wasn't for me. I don't even like first-person books all that much. I really don't care anymore. I just love this series so much. And that, in large part, is because of the character Harry Dresden. I was actually thinking about it recently that I remember mentioning in one of the first reviews I did on the Dresden Files that I suspected Harry Dresden might become one of these amazing, memorable characters who might become an actual favourite. And I was right, he is. In certain series, you remember some of the characters, but they don't stand out as vividly as Harry Dresden does. He, for me, is why I read the books. Him and Karen Murphy, another character in the books. And Mouse. And Butters, okay, no, there's a lot. Plus, I also love the humour. And in case you're not aware what the Dresden Files is about, it involves Harry Dresden, wizard, working in Chicago, where he is hired at times to deal with magical incidences or monsters or creatures that are affecting everyday people. He is so much more than that, of course, but if you want to know more about Harry Dresden, I would recommend that you watch my Stormfront review video, which is the first book in the Dresden Files series. I think it didn't take me long to realise this was going to become a favourite series. How much a favourite surprised me. I won't deny it. I never thought an urban fantasy would become a favourite of mine, and yet it really is. When I finish several books in this series, and I'm not telling you which because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, I was as emotionally wrung out as I was after The Wheel of Time. It had that strong an impact on me. I was very lucky that it happened to me twice with two great series. And last, I have to mention Agatha Christie, who I have not read since I was probably 14 years old, and I am 57 now, so that was a very, very long time ago. I am absolutely loving her books. They have not dated. They are definitely a joy to read. I think I read 18 in 1 month. Yeah, I went a little bit overboard. They are also extremely quick reads. What I'm loving about the Christie books isn't just the characters, it's also how clever her plots are, even to this day. And I'm also feeling like I'm reading period books now, because some of them date back to the 1920s, which is 100 years ago. So it's like reading about another time, another era. If you haven't read any Agatha Christie, I recommend that you try at least 1 or 2 and see what you think of them. I'm sure you'll love them as much as I did. You know, it's surprising. I didn't think I would enjoy the Agatha Christie books as much as I am. I thought perhaps I just loved them because I was young. Perhaps they were more simplistic than I realized, but they're not. They're actually very cleverly written. The plots are very clever. I like to try to guess, but I'm not always successful. Regardless, they were definitely favourites of mine from 2021. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. Now, I would love to hear what you read in 2021. What were your favourites? What were your least favourite books? I'd also love to hear what you thought of my list. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Have I inspired you to read something I've mentioned or not read it? And you can let me know down in the comments, or you can contact me on Instagram. Thank you all so very much for hanging out with me. I so appreciate that you take the time to watch my videos. It means a lot to me. And if you like this video, then you can do the usual. You can like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.